There are 6 weapons in Iran's arsenal. Can America neutralize all of them? Washington is preparing for what could define the entire Iran conflict, keeping the Strait of Hormuz open for business. Why? Widening to a fifth of global petroleum flows, price stability at the pump worldwide, and whether the Trump White House can avoid pressuring for an immediate ceasefire. The measure of victory here is simple. Get commercial shipping companies to believe that crossing these waters is safe enough that the premium prices they'll earn on crude oil deliveries justify the risk. We're breaking down 6 tactics Tehran might deploy to keep these waters locked down: missile systems, Shahd, unmanned aircraft, quadcopters, high-speed attack craft, underwater autonomous vehicles, and sea mines. For each one, we'll examine Washington's counter-strategy. This gives us a roadmap for tracking how this standoff unfolds. Before diving into specifics, we need to address a fundamental question. Can commercial vessels even be convinced to make the transit? The short answer is yes, provided they're confident the safety threshold is acceptable. The financial incentives are simply too massive to ignore. In fact, we're witnessing this dynamic play out right now. The strait isn't actually sealed off. It's more accurately described as severely restricted. During the initial 2 weeks of hostilities, roughly 2 tankers plus 3 other cargo vessels navigated these waters. Daily, that's a dramatic decrease from the typical 45 to 50 ships under peacetime conditions. But movement is happening. Those captains who made the journey likely received clearance from Tehran, which offers some reassurance but doesn't eliminate the possibility of being struck by accident. Still, the economics are too compelling for them to sit idle if they assess the danger as manageable. The vessels holding back are waiting for a credible security framework. Insurance isn't the holdup here. While private sector premiums have skyrocketed, the administration has committed to underwriting coverage. The real requirement is a military security plan. History shows that once a solid protection scheme exists, shipping activity does resume to near normal levels. When Iran started attacking Gulf traffic during its war with Iraq in the 80s, Washington initiated convoy escort operations. Oil continued moving. Today faces 2 complications. The first is having enough warships available for escort duty. This involves mobilization decisions for the American fleet and the political challenge of securing international coalition partners. It'll save the deeper analysis of that situation for later because the diplomatic maneuvering is currently a complete disaster. The second requirement is degrading Iranian capabilities enough that both military escorts and commercial operators believe the operation can proceed with acceptable risk levels. We're not in the 80s anymore. Warfare technology has advanced dramatically, and the threats Tehran can field have evolved accordingly. That's why we need to examine each threat vector individually. One more strategic development worth noting: the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group is heading home. This deployment has stretched far beyond standard carrier rotation timelines, initially because it was available for Venezuela operations, and then because it was positioned for Middle East redeployment. The crew is completely exhausted, and the ship's sanitation systems have become unreliable. A fire in the laundry facilities was apparently the breaking point. Bottom line, America's most powerful regional asset needs to dock for maintenance and crew rest. The George H.W. Bush is certified combat ready and will replace it, but the deployment timeline remains uncertain, and this could hamper how quickly American forces can respond to Iranian actions. Across the strait, let's examine the first threat: direct missile attacks against transiting ships. On the surface, this appears to be the most serious danger. However, Tehran faces challenges at both strategic and tactical levels. Strategically, one of Washington's top priorities from day one has been destroying Iranian missile infrastructure by striking every identified launcher. The campaign appears effective. Look at Iran's daily missile launch patterns. Massive volume on the opening day, followed by a sharp collapse. There was speculation about whether Iran was deliberately conserving a large stockpile for later use. That's probably partially accurate, but the bigger problem Tehran faces is that keeping launches hidden might mean losing them to American strikes before they're ever used. Wednesday's events are revealing here. Israel hit the South Pars gas complex. Unrelated to the cartoon, obviously. It'll leave the discussion of Israeli strategic objectives for another analysis. But South Pars represents a crown jewel of Iran's economy, being the planet's largest natural gas deposit. It's exactly the kind of target you'd want to avenge in order to deter a follow-up strikes. Iran did retaliate, launching approximately 30 more missiles than their recent daily average, with no sustained follow-through the next day. It's difficult to see clearly in this chart because the best available data only provides 3-day rolling averages. The key point is that Iran does appear to be holding some reserves. It's just not a particularly large amount. The picture regarding anti-ship missile inventories is murkier. These would rank as a tertiary priority for American targeting, behind air defense systems and then the previously mentioned ground attack missiles. CENTCOM only recently announced dedicated strikes against these launchers. We also lack the benefit of launch data since Iran hasn't activated this dimension of its war effort yet. Tactically, actually firing these missiles creates an immediate vulnerability for Iran. Missile launches generate massive radar signatures. With American surveillance aircraft maintaining constant airspace presence, retaliation could arrive within minutes. Iran attempts to mitigate this by mounting launchers on mobile trucks, essentially employing the same shoot and relocate tactics as HIMARS systems. That approach works far better when there is an American asset positioned to immediately deliver counterfires. This isn't comparable to Russia operating from deep behind front lines where response time is measured in hours. Overall, missiles remain worth monitoring closely. Iran might achieve some short-term success before losing its launch platforms. The critical questions are whether escort vessel standard defensive systems will prove sufficient, and on Iran's side, whether they possess enough launchers to sustain operations. Moving to the second system, Shahed drones. Shaheds are supposedly Iran's miracle weapon for every scenario, so I suppose America should just surrender now. Or maybe I'm about to go on a rant. I'm aware that certain Shahed variants can operate at 60,000 feet, but let's ground this discussion in reality. For a moment, it feels like we need to have this exact conversation every 3 months, just in different contexts. Social media is filled with analysis claiming that America is burning million-dollar Patriot interceptors to destroy Shaheds, costing tens of thousands. Therefore, the United States is inevitably going to lose this exchange. Every single element of this argument is incorrect. The conclusion fails because America is wealthy and Iran is not. You could theoretically accept that massive cost disparity and still prevail, even though doing so would be incredibly foolish. The substantive claim isn't just wrong, it's mathematically impossible. Despite Trump's rhetoric, the United States doesn't possess unlimited interceptor stocks. There were perhaps 1,000 Patriot missiles available when hostilities began. Iran has Shaheds numbered in the high tens of thousands. Within 72 hours, Iran had launched more Shaheds than America has Patriots. Even if cost were irrelevant, the arithmetic doesn't work. It was physically impossible for the United States to intercept Shaheds this way. Most importantly, the fundamental premise is false. The United States does not, in actual practice, use Patriots for Shahed interception. Not routinely, anyway. Perhaps a handful have been destroyed that way in emergency circumstances, but those are exceptional cases. Shaheds are slow and unsophisticated. No criticism intended. They're designed that way deliberately to achieve cost effectiveness, which is why America has reverse engineered the concept. Nonetheless, because Shaheds are slow and unsophisticated, you simply deploy F-35S to intercept them. This would almost certainly be integrated into the escort strategy, just as has been part of American Shahed defense operations throughout the conflict. There are additional platforms available that are even more economical and can maintain longer airborne presence. But let's reserve discussion of those systems for a different target type. These are merely the beginning of Iran's complications if it attempts Shahed deployment against shipping. Standard Shaheds rely on GPS targeting and lack precision, even with accurate coordinates. Ships are moving targets, though it's reasonable to assume escorts would travel along the distant side of the strait. Even if Iran could somehow launch a Shahed directly from the coastline, traversing the strait's narrowest point takes 12 minutes. Good luck predicting exactly where a moving vessel will be 12 minutes into the future. Naturally, as Shaheds cross, they'll face electronic jamming. The standard solution involves incorporating artificial intelligence, terrain matching, navigation, that functions considerably better when there's actual terrain and not exclusively ocean. Conversely, that AI guidance might assist with target acquisition once GPS places it in the general vicinity. One unknown variable is how much assistance Russia, which has been developing such capabilities, is reciprocating to Iran. Regardless, Shaheds remain slow and remain vulnerable targets for the aerial escorts, presumably patrolling the strait. All considered, Iran would be better served reserving Shaheds for swarming land-based objectives. Consequently, this represents a low priority concern. What about a different drone category, standard quadcopters? Theoretically, this could work, even if they inflict less damage than Shaheds. We've observed Ukraine or someone. It's a complete mystery executing this against several Russian Shadow Fleet targets. The crucial distinction will be American escort presence. The Russian Navy doesn't assign a warship to track every Shadow Fleet vessel. In contrast, the Gulf's compact size allows the United States to properly convoy everything that's advantageous for America, because jamming will likely be sufficient to neutralize quadcopters. The typical land-based counter to jammers or GPS spoofers involves deploying fiber optics guided drones to eliminate the jamming equipment first. That won't translate to maritime environments where distances exceed cable length limitations. I'll acknowledge there's probably tremendous potential for innovation in this domain. So don't completely dismiss quadcopters. Just don't expect this to resemble Ukrainian battlefield conditions transitioning to sea-based vectors. What about high-speed attack craft? There's a widespread perception that this represents a fundamental vulnerability, not just for tankers, but for the American Navy itself. The USS Cole incident provides the evidence. A single speedboat created one massive hull breach, killing 17 sailors. Therefore, the strait should be easy pickings. But let's not extrapolate military doctrine from a single incident from 25 years ago. The Cole was struck because the Navy maintained restrictive rules of engagement back then, and the Cole's crew essentially permitted the speedboat to approach directly to the hull. Following that incident, the Navy revised its engagement rules. Certainly within an active combat zone, any speedboat approaching a convoy will be treated as hostile. Swarms might move quickly, but they're not outrunning gunfire. The United States has also deployed a 1-0 Warhogs for engaging speedboats from above. If contemporary problems demand contemporary solutions, then old school problems demand old school and more economical solutions. Therefore, speedboats also rank low on the danger hierarchy. Returning to drones one final time, let's place them in or beneath the ocean surface. Drones begin resembling speedboats again. Anything approaching would immediately draw fire. The distinction is that swarming with drones makes considerably more sense than swarming with speedboats. The latter results in numerous casualties. The former might waste material, but perhaps achieves one breakthrough, inflicting significant damage. Subsurface drones represent a more serious concern, or are limited to drones underwater, because the United States claims to have eliminated Iran's entire conventional submarine fleet. Here you're relying on effective sonar performance and accepting higher per interceptor costs, contingent on those factors. You might avoid resembling these damaged Russian vessels. However, this is another domain where Iranian capability remains unclear. Ukraine invested years developing this technology. If Iran wasn't preparing for this moment, back in 2023, it won't be able to manufacture the capability overnight. Finally, we have mines. We've discussed the practical obstacles Iran faces if pursuing this option. And we've also covered how America allowed its mine clearance capabilities to deteriorate after the Cold War concluded. If Iran initiated minefield deployment, you'd need minesweepers operating before advancing with convoy operations. That's something for Tehran to consider. If it wants to halt this process, then we'd face an awkward period where the United States attempts deploying whatever demining assets it actually possesses. Hopefully, having rapidly destroyed Iran's mine-laying platforms to prevent this from becoming a larger problem, or an even larger problem, does materialize. And we get to observe what concessions Europe can extract from the White House in exchange for assistance. Either way, I don't view this as a significant direct threat to tankers once they're in convoy formation. They'll know whether crossing is safe or not. It won't be a gamble like attempting to run the strait facing the other 5 platform types, but it could delay this entire process indefinitely. Meanwhile, you don't need to wait indefinitely for my next video. I recorded a QA session on Wines on Maps Extra a few days ago. Check it out here. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Take care.